James is the owner of James Funeral Home and Northlake Memorial Gardens in Huntersville, North Carolina. Sam grew up in Huntersville and is passionate about serving his community and caring for them at such a vulnerable time. Sam began working at the Raymer Funeral Home in Huntersville at the age of 16. Following the death of his mentor, Johnny Raymer, he opened up James Funeral Home in 2010 at the age of 25, Joe. Since then, he has acquired Northlake Memorial Gardens and opened an on-site crematorium at their Huntersville location. And year after year, James Funeral Home and Northlake Memorial Gardens continues to grow and serve more families in their times of need. He is currently serving as the chair of the Huntersville's 150th anniversary committee and is the immediate past president of Lake Norman Huntersville Rotary Club and was this year the 2022 Lake Norman Chamber Business Person of the Year, Sam James.
Thank you for having me.
Sam, thank you so much, buddy. We really do appreciate you being here. Sam, I've been doing this show 10 years. This is the first time I've interviewed you, right?
It is.
Wow. How did I miss that?
I'm
need Bill Russell
delighted to be with you today.
Thanks, buddy. I need Bill Russell to get you in the studio. Thank you, buddy. We appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Sam, you've told this story, and you told it the other day because we had the Lake Norman Healthcare Forum just yesterday, and you shared a little bit about how you got into your business. And you shared this when you were at the Chamber banquet, too. Why did you go into this line of business?
So I went to a funeral when I was 5 years old for my grandmother, and Huntersville was a very, very small town when I was 5 years old. There were probably 1,500 people, not 70-some thousand people, and everybody knew everybody in the community. And I went to this funeral, and my dad did a very good job of explaining what the next few days were going to look like when Nana died. There was going to be a visitation, and the next day we were going to go, and a pastor was going to talk about her. He did a good job of explaining there's going to be a casket. He said a box, and I still remember this so vividly as a kindergartner. I thought that box would be a cardboard box. I wasn't expecting, what we think of as a casket. And he just talked through her body is going to be there, but we're a Christian family. He talked about how she is already with Jesus and went through all of that, and we're going to go to a cemetery and her body will be buried. We'd never even had a goldfish die. So, just this first experience with death.
Yeah.
And going to this funeral home, and I still remember Johnny Raymer so well. Johnny Raymer had gray hair. He was probably in his 40s, but to a little 5-year-old,
back then
I thought
it seemed like he was
100
really
years
old.
That's right. And went to this funeral and just saw he had just a effervescent personality. He was just a kind and gentle man, but also just a lot of fun to be around. And I just saw how he set my family's mind at ease. And I left that experience as a 5-year-old and said, when I grow up, I want to do what that guy does. And I never changed my mind. So I would drive past the funeral home and say, I'm going to work there one day. And when I was 16, I got a driver's license at the DMV in Mooresville. And my first stop was to ask for a job and started there in high school.
And now you are the 2002 Business Person of the Year.
2022.
Not 2002. Excuse me. And how long have you been in business?
So I left Raymer at the end of 2010 after Johnny passed away. And so we moved into our funeral home in Huntersville in 2012, but officially we started as a funeral home in 2010 when I left.
Right. Got it. Has it been everything you thought it would be?
I never really gave a whole lot of thought to the business side. I knew I wanted to serve families. I wanted to do that from the time I was 5. I knew I wanted to do it in Huntersville.
That is amazing. Since you were 5. You know that, Judge. There's very few people that can say that.
Well, it's really a gift from God to know as a young person what you want to do and then just be able to continue and plow forward. So I never really thought of myself as, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be a businessman. And I thought, I want to be a funeral director. I want to be, and there obviously is a business side that has to be taken care of to do what we do and make sure that there's payroll for folks that work for us and all of that. But I don't think of myself as some, successful businessman. I think of myself as a funeral director who gets to go to work every day doing something that I love.
What is the thing that you do that you enjoy the most, right? What is that drove you, that was the calling that you say that God gave you? Because you can break up any business into 5 or 6 different job titles or hats, right?
Sure.
What is that just interests you the most?
So as a little kid, I was like, I wonder how they do the embalming. I wonder where they keep the caskets. I had all these little curious kid questions.
Right.
And I always say that God used those curious kid questions to draw me into to what we do. And I started working at a funeral home, and of course those questions got answered pretty quickly.
Right.
What I fell in love with was meeting with families, being with them, walking through these really hard and vulnerable times in their life, being with them to have them say, this was so difficult, but you did everything you can to make it as easy as possible.
Right.
Sam, this morning we had a meeting of our nonprofits, and Jim Cooper from Hospice was there. I continue to be amazed at the role hospice plays, the role you play. I tell you, Joe, I don't think I could do what Sam and Jim
Oh no,
does.
not a chance.
You know, how do you? I mean, you're dealing with grief every day, and you might have somebody that's I think you shared yesterday at the healthcare forum somebody who's 101 that passes away. I didn't see that coming. Mm-hmm. But some people are prepared. Families are prepared when Nana passes away and she's lived to a ripe old age. But then you might have a 16-year-old. How do you deal with the grief that you personally might feel in that situation?
Yeah, because Sam, it does feel like it just bring you down.
There are certainly days that do bring you down. I would imagine that's constant in a lot of life. There's a lot of life that brings you down. I mean, you look, you watch the news and you see just the weight of the world, and people have troubles at home in their marriage and a variety of different things.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, I got to deal with Bill Russell, but right, you're right. I understand. Sometimes it's miserable. I understand.
It can be. And, we have a lot of days around the funeral home and a lot of funerals and folks that we take care of where there's very few tears. I mean, someone lived to be 102 years old. They're celebrating their life. They lived a full life. They have hope that there's something beyond where they're at now. They're glad they're not having to deal with the issues of the world that we live in. But then we certainly have, times when tragedies just seem to mount up, and we'll have 3 or 4 or 5 just really difficult funerals back to back. And it does weigh on you. One thing that we're very consistent with, we make sure that our folks take their time off, and we rotate on a schedule. So we're there for a period of time, and then we're off.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about that.
So it's because, and we do
because you can't continue this.
You do. You have to decompress, and we do 4 days off together after you work your period of time to let folks go, because it's 24/7.
Sam,
People don't realize that.
I would have never known that. That's a really interesting insight. That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, and I mean, everyone has different ways of coping with what they deal with, but. And it's a big push from the National Funeral Directors Association to say, make sure that folks are taking care of themselves. We already talked about mental health, but certainly the pile of stress that these situations can put funeral directors under can be difficult, and we need to make sure that they're well taken care of.
Interesting.
So I see you've got a ring on your finger, so you're married, I would assume.
I am.
So talk to me about your balance then of when you get home, how do you leave that at work? Because like Bill was asking you, the emotional drain that my dad passed in 2017. Thankfully, I know where he's at. I know I'm going to see him again one day. But for a lot of people, that's not there. So how do you balance when you get home all of those piling up, and how do you decompress? How does your wife decompress is probably the better question. But I don't want you speaking for her with her not here. But help us out with that.
Well, I think there's 2 pieces. One of the things that can be really frustrating for spouses of funeral directors is the schedule. I mean, I was at Thanksgiving dinner. We got a call in the middle of dinner. I'm gone. I'm going to a house. We're bringing somebody. So it's 24/7. Liz is extremely gracious. Mm-hmm. She puts up with it. And I started when I was 16 years old. So when we started dating, she didn't really know,
It's the life she married.
She knew.
Wait a second. What was that like when you told her when you were 16 years old, I work at a funeral home? Like, what was that? Like, she must be a strong woman to stick with you.
He didn't tell her on the first, second date.
Oh, come on.
Well, we went to school together and grew up together. So by the time we started dating, she knew what I did. And she was fine with it. But we had a lot of dates where we'd be on a date, and I'd get a call, and she would ride to Novant, Charlotte with me, or wherever the call was, and sit in the van while I went into the hospital.
Let me tell you something. The woman that does that, you knew.
You keep
she
them,
was
don't
in.
you?
That's right.
That's right. And she's all in. So you have the schedule piece of it. And then when I get home, she'll ask me, of course, how my day was. And we have kids that kind of at this point distract you, and they kind of take over when you walk in the door. But I really don't talk a lot about my day passed, it was a good day, this happened, I might tell a story if there's something that she would find of interest, but we don't talk a lot about, specifics of what's happening at the funeral home. And, that drive home, I try to just make that switch between working as a funeral director and being able to go in and roll on the floor with the kids.
Justin, do you like how we transition from wellness to the end?
We're the full spectrum here.
But you brought up an interesting question, a thing about your father. My father passed in 2019, and one of the things that he did was he went down beforehand, kind of unnerved my brother. My brother made a phone call to me, Joe, and said, Dad went down and talked to Green's Funeral Home in Rock Hill. Is there something going on? I don't know. So I called my father and was waiting for it. And he finally brought up, hey, I went down to see Frankie Green the other day. And I said, why? And I didn't want you to have to deal with this. He said,
I love that.
I wanted to take care of some things. Now, Joe, you would be interested to know this. He didn't pay for anything.
Hey, Bill, I told him you'll take care of that.
He picked out everything. He didn't pay for anything. But I want to
That's funny.
How important is it maybe for you to think about that so your spouse or your children don't have to make those decisions?
Is it common?
It's very common. We have a lot of folks that do it. One reason that people do it is because they're going under a Medicaid spend down. So they're in a nursing home. That's one thing that before your funds are eaten away, you can go prepay your funeral.
Oh, okay.
That's a big...
Well, don't just rough through that, buddy, because I know you don't care about money, but we do. Say that again, because that's an important thing to know.
It is important.
So you can prepay just like any other expenses.
And what you shared yesterday, you're locking it in.
You can. So it's. I always say the only other thing I can think of is the forever stamp that you pay for it now, and you can use it whenever you want it. I can't go to the Ford dealership and say I'm going to pay for this car now and get it in 30 years. And it's going to be the new car.
2030, right?
That's right. So of course things go up over time, but our industry standard and something that we hold to is if somebody comes in and they pay for a funeral now and just we'll throw out numbers, say it's $10,000 and they're 70 years old and they perhaps could live to 90 and the funeral's gone up to $12,500, we discount the difference at the time. They don't.
And also, if when they go to a nursing home, Uncle Sam takes it all.
Sure. Well, nursing home care is expensive, so they're paying $10,000 a month or whatever at a nursing home. Those funds, even if you have a lot of money, it can be depleted. So if you pay for it ahead of time, it's taken care of, and the kids aren't having to split it at the time.
I didn't mean to take you off, but that's important, Pete, that very few people don't know about.
And let's say Joe goes down there, does that, funeral home goes out of business. What?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you prepay your funeral, you don't write a check to James
How
Funeral Home.
come he ask if I go down there? I mean, why don't you say Justin?
When you prepay,
Still silence, by the way. Still silence.
When you prepay your funeral, you write a check not to James Funeral Home, but to an insurance company, and they hold the funds. And if James Funeral Home goes out of business, burns down, whatever would happen to the funeral home, and things do happen to funeral homes over the course of time, you can take that monies to any other funeral home. The state board will notify you that something's happened and your money's safe in an insurance policy. So,
and I know you're don't want to get into the business side. Do you get any benefit from my mom buying in advance as an owner of the funeral home?
So
and we don't have to get into weeds. I'm just sure. I didn't know that you were actually paying an insurance company.
Yeah. So the big benefit for a funeral home is that in the value of the funeral home is essentially guaranteed business. People can transfer their funerals, but it's very unlikely. So it gives a funeral home a sense of security and a sense of knowing what's in the future when you have X dollars.
Okay, so it's sort of equity building, not revenue producing until.
That's right. And these policies do gain interest, so we hope that the interest keeps up with the cost.
Got it.
But it typically doesn't.
Right. Okay.
So we discount it.
Justin, you have a question?
Well, I was going to, not to take us away from the money conversation of this, but back to community, because you've talked about a community. You grew up in Huntersville, which that's a rarity, right? Especially as we become more transient of a community. What do you think the role of a funeral home in the community is, besides just being the place where you stick all the bodies, right? What do you think the role really is of a funeral home?
Well, funeral homes do two very important things. They get the dead where they need to go. There's a dead body. It has to be cared for. It needs to be cremated. It needs to be buried. And then they get the living where they need to be. But they have a family that's left behind. So how do you memorialize? How do you celebrate? How do you care for? How do you walk a family through the traditions that would comfort them? at that time of life. So, I'm very involved in our community. I love our community. I care about our community. I don't want to own a chain of funeral homes across North and South Carolina, across the country. A lot of folks do that. That's wonderful. I want to be a funeral director for Huntersville, North Carolina. So I have a vested interest in making sure that our community is healthy and well taken care of.
And you don't drive across the border from like South Carolina every day, right? You're not just pulling my leg on that. You stick on that Lake over there.
I have a Huntersville address. That is true. And I have my entire life.
So, Sam, I remember years ago you and I were talking at a networking event. Let's just say it was a chamber event, not to upset Bill, okay? And you and I started talking about, you can remember back when you were 20-something years old, going to the bank to get a loan for over $1 million to build this building, because you just can't do a funeral home out of your basement, right? I mean, requires some formality. Talk about starting that business, because that's a big deal at that age.
Sure. So I did something. I mentioned that we moved into our building in 2012, but I started the funeral home in 2010 when I left. And you kind of can run a funeral home out of your basement in North Carolina. It's called a funeral service licensee. So you can't advertise yourself as James Funeral Home. You have to advertise yourself as a funeral service licensee. So when I left, 2 weeks later, we did our first funeral.
Oh, interesting.
And you have to have another funeral home, which obviously your close funeral homes geographically are not going to want to have any part in this. So I'm in Huntersville. I use Troutman Funeral Home in Troutman. And you have to let the state board know basically where the body's going. But I would, when I would get a call from a hospice house or hospital or whatever, I would take the body to the funeral home there, and then I would go to their home and meet with them. And we would have the funeral at the church or wherever.
Right.
And
they did this because they wanted you officiating.
They wanted me. They wanted me at the funeral, and it was very interesting. We had great support. I mean, I was embarrassed when it first happened, but there was an article in the local newspaper that said Johnny Raymer's. They wanted me to sign a non-compete, and I said no, and that ended that.
Right.
And it said Johnny Raymer's protege fired by the. I'm like, this is so embarrassing. And
Justin, tell him that's a dime a dozen story, isn't it?
Don't worry about it. I was taught rule number 2, day 1: don't believe what they say about you, both good or bad.
I understand. Well, I still have people, 12, 13 years later, they'll come in and say, my dad saw that article in the newspaper. And most people root for small business. They root for the local guy. And they would say, you had done my grandmother's funeral, and he just really, whatever, and this year. And then he saw that article. He saw, he didn't like how you were treated. And he said, that's where I want to go when I die. So,
there's so much loyalty in that, too. I think I've shared with you in Rock Hill, which is where I'm from. My mama's side of the family always goes to Bass Coffin. My dad's side of the family always goes to Green Funeral Home, and there is no mixing. That's exactly what happens. I want to switch gears for a minute because you've been involved in the Lions Club. You're the immediate past president of the Rotary Club. You're chairing our 150th anniversary. You got involved in the Chamber of Commerce, Southlake Christian School. It goes on, the things that you've been involved in the community. Why is community service so important to you, and why should it be important to any small business owner?
Well, I think community service, even if you don't own a business, is really important for I think it's better. It does as much for me as it does for anybody else. When I was in college, I went to Erskine College in Due West, South Carolina, and I joined the Lions Club while I was there. I had no business gain from joining the Lions Club in Due West, South Carolina, but I liked the community. I cared about the community. I wanted to get to know people in the community, so I joined the Lions Club. And I see so many people. There was an article in the paper today about just how lonely people are, and I think, why aren't these people involved in civic work? It's so good. And I do see there are retirement groups and different things. And certainly there's been benefits to being involved, getting to go to a chamber networking event or whatever that you're involved with. But, when people ask me about joining Rotary, and I'm a financial planner and I just started and here I am and I want to come join the Rotary Club. And it's like, that's great. But, there's only 30 or 40 people and you're going, and then they join, and in 6 months they've gotten to know everyone and they're gone.
Right.
They don't stick it out. They're not there for the right reason of wanting to serve the community.
Right.
That they. I mean, I love our community. I care deeply for our community, and I want to see it thrive. A thriving community helps my kids who are growing up in it. It helps my wife to have things to plug into. It helps everybody. So why not? And our community has given me so much. They've showed me loyalty, and I feel like there's an indebtedness that I have to give back and to care for the community.
And this goes to what we've been talking about this entire show, which is living an intentional life. I mean, if you feel something's missing, go find it.
Exactly.
And there's got to be a community or association or something that you can connect with.
Right. I was on the board of the Serenity House for a long time, and the Serenity House is this end-of-life care home. And you go to hospice, and hospice is wonderful, but hospice works alongside. Hospice comes into your home, but what if you don't have a home? And there were people who literally hospice was trying to care for them under a bridge.
Oh,
but you can't properly give end-of-life care to somebody under the bridge, or their spouse was working or whatever. And that was started because a hospice nurse saw a need where she was from Rochester, New York. She had end-of-life care homes there. She goes, where are the end-of-life care homes to take care of these people? And it's nonprofit, all free, and it met that need. And it's so neat to see somebody that sees that need in the community and then just runs for it to make it work.
Through COVID, and I don't want to make you give away any trade secrets, but
let's see if we can get some.
Going back to the business side, how have the habits of people, if at all, changed when selecting a funeral home and selecting that kind of final resting caregiver to their loved one? What's that been like for you and your business, and what you guys have seen in the changes?
Well, I think one thing that was very interesting in COVID, when people could not have a service, they really wanted to have a service. People that may not have had a service to start with were like, I can't have a service. That makes me mad, And
I don't want one. I want to be able to have one.
And I saw a lot of very sweet graveside services at a church cemetery with 5 or 10 people. And sometimes I thought, I think this is, in a lot of ways, easier for the grieving 88-year-old widow to just have her family, and it was sweet. But, I had personal losses during COVID and in different communities where I would have gone to the funeral, and I couldn't because it was COVID and it was limited to 10 people, and I wasn't going to take up one of those spots. And, I miss that. And being there virtually is great. One thing that's happened, every funeral home has live streaming now, and that was not the case beforehand. And every funeral home does live streaming. I don't know of any that do not. But it's not the same thing as being there in person. Live streaming's okay. It's for if someone distant that you want to see. But to go there and to be able to hug them and to be able to let them know that you love them and to travel that distance is meaningful. And, in COVID, we saw that that we missed that, and that there's something really important. I mean, Mom has died. To being able to gather and to being able to eat together, to be a family, to pull people. A lot of families don't see each other a lot outside of weddings and funerals. So you take these events away and you really lose connectivity. So it was really important. And I hear all of the time, I'm so glad that, we're through this so that we can all be together. And
Sam, this is a Chamber of Commerce program, and you've been super involved. You served on the board. Every year you have a business after hours. Why should somebody, if they're a new business in town, why should they, or say they're an existing business, why should they get involved in the Chamber of Commerce?
I think there are 2 big benefits that I've seen to the Chamber. One is just networking. I mean, great networking events. The Lake Norman Chamber calendar is so full of networking events. It's great. I mean, they're almost daily. But then the other thing, you were speaking yesterday at the Lake Norman Health Forum about Facebook ads. And there are these events that are included. I don't have the resources that Mike has at Novant as a small business. So to be able to go to something that's offered for free as part of your membership and to learn how to do something, because, small business owners wear a lot of hats. They provide resources that allow you to get something done on your own that you couldn't do, or it would cost you a lot of money. if you were having to do it yourself.
Well, I am a Huntersville resident, and so I want to thank you so very much for taking care of our families, but also for what you're doing on the 150th celebration. Joe, and I know we're going to get to another guest, but share real quickly what we're doing with Huntersville.
So Huntersville's turning 150 years old. Mooresville, interesting enough, is having their 150th. They were both incorporated in the same year. So Huntersville's turned 150, so we're doing a few different things. We're trying to educate. So like right now, we're working on a video series that's going to come out over the next few months of just the history of Huntersville. Why is Huntersville called Huntersville? How did Huntersville grow from 1,000 people to 70,000 people? Just those kind of basic, if you're moving to Huntersville, you should know a little bit about the town that you live in. And then the other piece that we're doing is we're just celebrating, and it's really fun. I stay as far away from political committees and town and local politics as possible because I want to be loved by everybody, which getting involved in town politics is the way to not be loved by everybody. But I am like, this is just a celebration, so I will get on this committee. So we're just celebrating, and in a world where there's so much negativity, just to be able to celebrate that, or have, we had an event in February, cake off, where bakers made cakes and kids came, and we had 1,000 people there at the rec center throwing pies in commissioners' faces and just silly stuff. Yeah. But it was so neat. We're having a big event September 23rd, which is a fireworks show, and just bringing bands in, and just we have something exciting to celebrate. Huntersville is a wonderful town. I go to, we travel, and it is so good to come back home. And it's a great place to live. It's a great place to work. It's a great place to play with the lake and all the fun stuff that we have. And it's a great community to be a part of, and it's easy to celebrate Huntersville.
Sam James, Sam's a well-deserved 2022 Business Person of the Year. Sam, thank you so much, buddy. I really do appreciate you being here.
Thank you.